Hey guys, I'm back. Oh my god, I'm on a roll. Somebody stop me. Grit, we're gritting it. We are actually we're finishing up Distracted by Talent and we're going into Effort Counts Twice later, like when I get off work maybe, okay? So, I'm trying to do this in a very timely fashion before my children find me. So here we go. The year I left McKinsey for teaching, 3 of the firm's partners published a report called The War for Talent. The report was widely read and eventually became a best-selling book. The basic argument was that companies in the modern economy rise and fall depending on their ability to attract and retain A players. Like when you bring your A game. What do we mean by talent? The McKinsey authors ask in the book's opening pages, answering their own question. In the most general sense, talent is the sum of a person's abilities, his or her intrinsic gifts, skills, knowledge, experience, intelligence, judgment, attitude, character, and drive. It also includes his or her ability to learn and grow. That's a long list, and it reveals the struggle most of us have when we try to define talent with any precision, but it doesn't surprise me that intrinsic gifts are mentioned first. When Fortune magazine put McKinsey on its cover, the lead article began, "When in the presence of a young McKinsey partner, one gets the distinct impression that if plied with a cocktail or two, he might well lean across the table and suggest something awkward, like comparing SAT scores." It's almost impossible, the journalist observed, to overestimate the premium placed within the McKinsey culture on analytic ability, or, as its denizens say, on being bright. McKinsey is famous for recruiting and rewarding smart men and women, some with MBAs from places like Harvard and Stanford, and the rest like me who possess some other credential that suggests we must have very big brains. My interviews with McKinsey unfolded as most do, with a series of brain teasers designed to test my analytic mettle. One interviewer sat me down and introduced himself and asked, "How many tennis balls are manufactured in the United States per year?" Who cares? I guess there are 2 ways to approach that question. I responded, "The first way is to find the right person or maybe trade organization to tell you." My interviewer nodded but gave me a look that said he wanted the other kind of answer. Or you could take some basic assumptions and do some multiplying to figure it all out. My interviewer smiled broadly, so I gave him what he wanted. Okay, assume there are about 250 million people in the United States. Let's say the most active tennis players are between the age of 10 and 30. That's got to be, roughly speaking, 1/4 of the population. I guess that gives you a little over 60 million potential tennis players. Now my interviewer was really excited. I continued the logic game, multiplying and dividing by numbers according to my completely uninformed estimates of how many people actually play tennis, and how often they play on average, and how many balls they would use in a game, and how often they would need to replace dead or lost balls. I got to some number which was probably wildly off, because at every step I was making another uninformed assumption that was, to some degree or another, incorrect. Finally I said, "The math here isn't that hard for me. I'm tutoring a little girl who is practicing her fractions right now, and we do a lot of mental math together. But if you want to know what I'd really do if I needed to know the answer to that question, I'll tell you. I'd just call someone who actually knows." More smiling, and then an assurance that he'd learned all he needed to from our interaction, and also from my application, including my SAT scores, which McKinsey heavily relies on to do their early sorting of candidates. In other words, if the advice to corporate America is to create a culture that values talent above all else, McKinsey practices what it preaches. Once I accepted the offer to join the New York City office, I was told that my first month would be spent in a fancy hotel in Clearwater, Florida. There I joined about 3 dozen other new hires who, like me, lacked any training in business. Instead, each of us had earned some other academic badge of honor. I sat next to a guy with a PhD in physics, for example. On my other side was a surgeon, and behind me were 2 lawyers. None of us knew much about management in general, or about any industry in particular, but that was about to change. In a single month, we would complete a crash course called the Mini MBA. Since we were all vetted to be super fast learners, there was no question that we would successfully master a massive amount of information in a very short amount of time. Newly equipped with a casual acquaintance with cash flow, the difference between revenue and profit, and some other rudimentary facts about what I now knew to call the private sector, were shipped off to our designated offices around the world, where we would join teams of other consultants and be matched up with corporate clients to solve whatever problems they threw our way. I soon learned that McKinsey's basic business proposition is straightforward. For a very large sum of money per month, companies can hire a McKinsey team to solve problems too thorny to be solved by the folks who are already working on them. At the end of this engagement, as it was called in the firm, we were supposed to produce a report that was dramatically more insightful than anything they could have generated in-house. It occurred to me as I was putting together slides summarizing bold, sweeping recommendations for a multi-billion-dollar medical products conglomerate that really I had no idea what I was talking about. There were senior consultants on the team who may have known more, but there were also more junior consultants who, having just graduated from college, surely knew even less. Why hire us then at such an exorbitant cost? Moving on. Well, for one thing, we had the advantage of an outsider's perspective, untainted by insider politics. We also had a method for solving business problems that was hypothesis and data-driven. There were probably lots of good reasons CEOs brought in McKinsey. But among them, I think, was that we were supposed to be sharper than the people who were already on site. Hiring McKinsey meant hiring the very best and brightest, as if being the brightest also made us the best. According to the war for talent, the companies that excel are those that aggressively promote the most talented employees, while just as aggressively culling the least talented. In such companies, huge disparities in salary are not only justified but desirable. Why? Because competitive winner-take-all environment encourages the most talented to stick around and the least talented to find alternative employment. Duff McDonald, the journalist who's done the most in-depth research on McKinsey to date, has suggested that this particular business philosophy would be more aptly titled The War on Common Sense. McDonald points out that the companies highlighted in the original McKinsey report as exemplars of their endorsed strategy didn't do so well in the years after that report was published. Journal is calling me. They can wait. Journalist Malcolm Gladwell has also critiqued the war for talent. Enron, he points out, epitomized the talent mindset approach to management advocated by McKinsey. As we all know, the Enron story doesn't have a happy ending. Once one of the largest energy trading companies in the world, Enron was named America's most innovative company by Fortune magazine 6 years in a row. Yet, by the end of 2001, when the business filed for bankruptcy, it had become clear that the company's extraordinary profits were attributable to massive and systematic accounting fraud. When Enron collapsed, thousands of its employees who had no hand at all in the wrongdoing lost their jobs, health insurance, and retirement savings. At the time, it was the largest corporate bankruptcy in U.S. history. You can't blame the Enron debacle on a surfeit of IQ points. You can't blame it on a lack of grit, either. But Gladwell argues convincingly that demanding Enron employees prove that they were smarter than everyone else inadvertently contributed to a narcissistic culture with an overrepresentation of employees who were both incredibly smug and driven by deep insecurity to keep showing off. Anyways, it was a culture that encouraged short-term performance but discouraged long-term learning and growth. The same point comes through in the post-mortem documentary on Enron called, appropriately enough, The Smartest Guys in the Room. During the company's ascendancy, it was a brash and brilliant former McKinsey consultant named Jeff Skilling who was Enron's CEO. Skilling developed a performance review system for Enron that consisted of grading employees annually and summarily firing the bottom 15%. Just like... In other words, no matter what your absolute level of performance, if you were weak relative to others, you got fired. Inside Enron, this practice was known as rank and yank. Skilling considered it one of the most important strategies his company had, but ultimately it may have contributed to a work environment that rewarded deception and discouraged integrity. We're going to stop there. Rewarded deception and discouraged integrity. Something to think about. All right, y'all. Everybody have a good day. I am going to go to work. Hopefully Winter Storm Juniper is going to calm itself sometime soon. I do see the sunshine, so that's good. Thank you. See you soon. Much love.